Now we have the video of the NFC South. Starting out, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They drafted Mark Barron, the strong safety, with their first round pick. Then Orson Charles, the tight end. Brandon Brooks, the offensive guard. Then Josh Gordon in the fourth round. Now, Josh Gordon in the real NFL, he was taken in the second round of the supplemental draft for Cleveland. But I don't do the supplemental draft at all, so I just put him in. Josh Gordon is probably one of the better receivers in this class. He will be suspended the same times he was in real life, but his first year he's going to probably be a big addition for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I figured slipping to the fourth round, if he were in the real draft, makes sense because if there's any character concerns. Then in the fifth round, they have Corey Toomer, Brandon Taylor, the strong safety, and then Tahir Whitehead at outside linebacker to finish their draft. So looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they actually, despite the fact Blaine Gabbert is not that great of a quarterback, they do have a pretty solid team around him. So Matt Schaub, although he's a higher overall, they're going to go with their first round pick last year for his second season. We see Darren McFadden is one of the all-star running backs in this league when healthy, and Javid Best can carry the workload when McFadden is injured. So that running back duo is very strong for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it keeps them competitive. Mike Tolbert, solid fullback for them. Then we see Jeremy Maclin, recently acquired free agent Jerome Simpson, and then Josh Gordon are their top three receivers. You got Denard Alexander, and then Chaz Schillens was the kick returner for the San Francisco 49ers. He comes over from free agency to the Buccaneers. Owen Daniels has been their kind of long-standing tight end, I think, since 2006 or 07, whichever draft he was in. But Tom Santi and Orson Charles, even though he was a second-round pick. Again, tight ends in this draft class were bad, so he's not the best second-round pick, but that is the pick they made. As for left tackle, they pick up New England Patriots left tackle Jason Peters, which is a solid addition for their left side of their line. They have Evan Mathis, Jason Spitz, Brandon Brooks, and Anthony Davis. Even Mackenzie Bernardeau, Barry Richardson, some solid backups for their offensive line. Defensively, they have Jason Hatcher and Mark Anderson, and Anderson has been a very solid contributor for them. Geno Atkins, Ron Brace, Drake Nevis right there in the middle of the defensive line. Linebackers, they still have Derek Johnson. He's getting older, but he is still a top-tier linebacker. You see 93 overall. They do have Geno Hayes at the left side, and probably could use some help on that right side. As for a corner, they did sign Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. They did lose Darrelle Revis in free agency, which is their big loss, because Revis was drafted to Tampa Bay for Revis Island, but Revis is now a New England Patriot. They do have Ladarius Webb, Cedric Griffin, Jerome Murphy as corners. And then safeties, there was definitely a point of needing of help. We see John Wendling and Cole Anderson at free safety, but then rookie Mark Barron, the hard-hitting safety addition, is going to be their strong safety option with Andrew Sandejo backing him up. As for return, we see Chaz Schillens will be the return man, along with Nicholas Setta at kicker and Mike Seifries at punter. The Buccaneers, even though sometimes they don't always look like they're the best team out there, they always have a chance to win in this division. The NFC South is anybody's guess as to who is going to win. So let me know what you think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for this upcoming season. Next up is the Atlanta Falcons. And they traded away their first-round pick to the Kansas City Chiefs. So that was the 22nd overall pick. They pick up a first-round pick next year, and they pick up a second-round pick this year. Maybe not a whole lot to pick up just to move back in the second round, but they did pick up a first round next year. So they take, with that first pick, which is the Chiefs pick, number 8, Jarrell Worthy at DT. They have Trumaine Johnson, and it's with a 17th pick, and they acquired that from the Chicago Bears because when they signed Peyton Manning, they traded away Jason Campbell to the Chicago Bears for a second-round pick, and that was the 17th overall. And then their second-round pick, the 22nd, is Zach Brown, the outside linebacker. Third round, they take Kellen Moore. Again, in real life, when Denver Broncos signed Peyton Manning, they drafted Brock Osweiler. Now, Kellen Moore is no Brock Osweiler. I think he's a 49 overall. So not expecting much out of him, but Probably a high pick for that bad of a quarterback. Then in the 4th round, they went with Austin Pasture. And we see Terrell Manning, Matt Johnson, and the last pick there in the 7th round is Mike Brewster. Looking at their depth chart, we see Peyton Manning, who is 89 overall. He's an old man, but he is coming off that neck injury to join the Atlanta Falcons, who were a top team last year. They were number 1 team, basically. And so they are trying to win a Super Bowl. Jason Campbell didn't do anything wrong. He just didn't get them to the chip. And so you have Peyton Manning with Caleb Haney, who is signed as a backup, and Kellen Moore is their rookie. They did acquire in the free agency Willis McGahee from the St. Louis Rams. Strong runner. He is older, but this is a team that's all in to win now. LeGarrette Blount and even old man Brandon Jacobs also there. As for receivers, they have Larry Fitzgerald. At the end of preseason, they traded one of their second-round picks for Braylon Edwards from the Seattle Seahawks. They also had Robert Meacham. And then there's Deion Butler and Joseph Morgan. Deion Butler has like 97 speed. He's a speedster, solid receiving option for Peyton Manning. But you see the Fitzgerald, Edwards, Meacham combo is going to be very hard to stop, giving Manning a lot of good options. They do have Julius Thomas, who actually was the Denver Broncos tight end. They have Ben Troop, Richard Quinn at tight end. As for offensive line, we see Nate Soldier, a pick from last year, Lance Lewis, Rob Sims, Ramon Foster, and Jordan Gross, who was drafted to the Atlanta Falcons, I believe back in 2003, because he was supposed to blindside block for Michael Vick. But then he was with the Falcons for several years. Last year he was with the Detroit Lions, or maybe for a couple years, and now he is back in Atlanta. On the defensive side, we see Jabal Sheard and Cliff Averill as their main pass rushers, with Greg Hardy as kind of the backup for both. Travis Johnson, Kevin Vickerson, rookie Jarrell Worthy there as at defensive tackle. Their star defensive player there on the linebacking core is Clay Matthews. They have Darrell Washington as well, Nick Bellore in the middle, and Robert Mathis, the old man. Zach Brown kind of now in a position to sort of succeed Robert Mathis as the right outside linebacker, maybe give a year or two. As for cornerback, they boast Antonio Cromartie as their shutdown corner. Then it kind of drops. We see C.J. Gaddis, Curtis Brown. Trumaine Johnson probably might move up into that second cornerback spot. We're not sure yet. As for their safeties, though, Bob Sanders has been one of the league's best safeties. When we look at this NFC South division, they are known for a solid defense. And so the Buccaneers are good in defense. The Falcons have been number 1 or a top 5 defense. Panthers were a stellar defense. I'll get to them in a bit. And then even the Saints have had some moments. But Bob Sanders was a major addition. He was like almost rookie of the year defensively in his rookie campaign, and he's only ever been a stellar pro. Strong safety, we see Cam Chancellor. And now he hasn't really progressed to where I wanted him to be. He's only a 72 overall. But now we look at special teams. We see Joseph Morgan, Jeff Reed as kicker, and Reggie Hodges at punter. I expect a lot of things from the Falcons. They do have Brad Childress as their head coach. Ray Horton has left them for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But this is a team that is in a win-now mode, and we will see if Peyton Manning can do what Matt Ryan could not do, and that was take the Atlanta Falcons to a Super Bowl and win it. As for the Panthers, we see them drafting David DeCastro, offensive guard, in the first round, followed by T.Y. Hilton. Definitely a good pickup there because they've always been suffering with a wide receiver issue. Yes, they have Steve Smith. They had Steve Smith Sr. for many years, but they were never able to really find that wide receiver 2 until Torrey Smith drafted last year. So now they get Torrey Smith and T.Y. Hilton. They have D.T. Loney Fangupo, Danny Trevathan, a linebacker, Kelvin Beachum, offensive guard, Trenton Robinson, and then they finish off with Aaron Brown in the 7th round. When looking at this Panthers team, they can't come off being one of the top defenses in the league, but have been severely gutted this past offseason. But they are led by Joe Flacco, a quarterback, and he did sign an extension with them, cheaper than expected. They do have Lorenzo Booker, Ben Tate, Andre Dixon, and the Panthers have been a team that always sort of operate with a dual running back system that started with Larry Johnson and Michael Turner. Then it was Michael Turner and Lorenzo Booker. Now it's Lorenzo Booker and Ben Tate. And so we're going to probably see that cycle continue for the Panthers, where Ben Tate will eventually move into the starting role. Booker will go somewhere else, and we'll see them draft or bring in another running back to be the younger of the two. Leonard Weaver still sticking around, and we see the Torrey Smith, T.Y. Hilton wide receiver combo with Maurice Stovall. They signed Devin Thomas, and then Trenton Holiday, Blair White as receivers. Anthony Fasano is there as their lead tight end. Bear Pasco, and then Michael at tight end. On the O-line, we see Bryant McKinney, Chris Dielman, David Boz, DeCastro, and David Stewart. You see Josh Beekman also there, and Beekman could be their starter. However, I thought best player available at that time was DeCastro, and he's going to be an anchor for what is starting to become an older O-line. So he's going to be able to be the fresh offensive lineman for the Panthers. Now on defense. So they've lost DeMarcus Ware. They lost Dan Morgan to free agency. They've lost Chris Jenkins at defensive tackle. But they still have a solid defense. We see Carlos Dunlap, Julius Peppers, Robert Ayers. Then DT, they have Pat Sims. They signed Kevin Williams, who never really amounted to the Kevin Williams we know from the early 2000s, 2007, kind of 97 overall caliber player. Always has been mediocre. He was drafted to the, I think he was drafted to the Bears. Or was that in real life? Wherever. Well, he was drafted, and then he went to the Bengals, and so he was drafted to the Bears. And so he played well, but never became the star he was supposed to be. In linebackers, they do sign LeVar Arrington from Baltimore, so he is a 70 overall, but a veteran presence, trying to replace that Dan Morgan veteran. They did have Tavares Gooden, Jabbar Williams. They signed Gooden there to replace Morgan at middle linebacker. Of course, none of these, and then Philip Wheeler was signed from the Raiders. They had Danny Trevathan, who I thought would have been a higher overall than that, but none of them replaced DeMarcus Ware, of course. Then at cornerback, they have Devin McCourty, Sam Shields, Chris Harris Jr., Alfonso Smith, Captain Munnerlyn. And what happened was they were such a strong defense, but they always lacked a good cornerback. So I ended up drafting a lot of cornerbacks. And so now they are pretty much consistent there. They don't have a superstar corner, but they do have a lot of depth at corner. At safety, this is the duo I love the most. We got Daniel Manning and Michael Huff, both drafted in the same draft year. And it was an accident because I didn't mean to draft two safeties. I think it was like second and third round, or maybe it was first and second. But I drafted two safeties in a row, and I was like, I can't believe I did that. I'm so dumb. But then they've become the safety duo that's so desirable. We also see Trenton Robinson, Troy Nolan as backups. Then for a return, we have Trenton Holiday, Torrey Smith, return specialists Aaron Petrie and Daniel Sepulveda as the special teamers. Although the Panthers can still make the playoffs, and John Fox has been head coach of the year like 3 out of the 4 years, I believe. I'm not as optimistic about the Panthers because they do now have Peyton Manning to go up against. The Buccaneers are still solid. I'm not too worried about the Saints, but there's an uphill climb in the NFC, and I think that this team is going to start treading some water. The Saints go with Isaiah Pead at their first pick and 25th overall as a running back. Again, they needed some youth in that running back core. They have Ladainian Tomlinson. They but they let go Felix Jones, who would have been their starting running back. So losing Jones, Tomlinson being injury prone and 33 years old, they need youth, and that's what they bring in with Isaiah Pead. They bring in offensive line help with Mike Adams at offensive tackle, even more offensive line help with Gino Gradkowski and Mike Daniels on the defensive line there in the fourth. Josh Robinson, cornerback, Jay Crawford, and then Jarris Pendleton. So the last three picks, all defense. Now we look at their offense. They are still running with Tim Tebow and Josh McDaniels at head coach. They bring in Kevin Kolb as the backup. And then Anthony Morelli, what's funny about him was he was the backup quarterback in New England when Josh McDaniels was in New England. So I thought it was kind of amusing to bring Morelli, a 55 overall guy, to the Saints as the backup for Tebow. Just kind of like that backup quarterback paired with a coach that he likes. They did sign Rashard Mendenhall, so he Mendenhall sort of takes the main starting role. However, I'm trying to get Pede more playing time because it's like that first round rookie running back, and he's trying to be the star running back in the league. Fiametta comes back. Wide receivers, they got Brandon Marshall, who's their star. They have Kenny Britt, who needs to kind of step up a bit. Antonio Bryant's the old receiver veteran. We'll see how long he stays with this team. I mean, he might be a trade target if they are losing. Clyde Gates, David Nelson. But then there's Greg Olsen, who has risen as a solid contributor, but he hasn't really progressed deep into the 80s. Then Anobin and Morgan Cox, the last two tight ends. O-line, they have Andrew Whitworth, who's been their solid left tackle for many years, Josh Sitton, Doug Dadish, Lee Charles Bentley, and then they do have Mike Williams at the right tackle. So we see how they have progressed as the O-line. Mike Adams there is just some depth. Hopefully, even though he's a second-round pick, we will see if he's able to progress a little bit and maybe be a starter down the road. There also is Mansfield Roto on the right side as well. As for their defense, they don't stack up as well as the rest of the NFC South, but they have Michael Johnson at left end, Cameron Jordan on right end, Linval Joseph, Julian Jenkins. They drafted Jarris Pendleton. Kevin Burnett is left outside linebacker, and you see Aaron Curry. He was one of the top 5 or top 10 picks back in 2011. I think it was 2011. So, or maybe it was 2010. I don't remember. Point is, Aaron Curry was a top pick, and of course he's not panning out as we all expected he wouldn't. Trent Cole, the veteran, on the right side. They did sign Keyonta Dawson, who is their middle linebacker with Jasper Brinkley. Their biggest star on defense, I mean, some might look at Cameron Jordan or Linval Joseph, but truly is Patrick Peterson. The rookie. No, Patrick Peterson was 2011. Curry would have been 2010. Then you have Kerry Williams, Josh Robinson, E.J. Biggers. C.C. Brown, not a spectacular free safety. Then there's Tyvon Branch, who is a solid safety, a strong safety there for them. So between Patrick Peterson and Tyvon Branch, those are some of their stars in their secondary. As for a return specialist, we have Clyde Gates, E.J. Biggers. Pede could come in as a kick returner. But we see Mason Crosby, their kicker, and Britton Colquitt. But as for the NFC South, I'm thinking it's going to be probably Falcons, Bucks, Panthers, Saints. Let me know your thoughts on this season preview for the NFC South.